I am more concerned that Frank Reich takes Aaron Glenn to Carolina with him to make him a defensive coordinator there than I am Glenn getting a head coaching job in Indianapolis, because I do ultimately believe it will be Jeff Saturday who gets that job. Where do you think Dan Campbell is right now in this whole thing? I mean, obviously you've got to be prepared for your coaches leaving.
Oh, yeah.
But is there a guy that jumps off the page at you that you would, heaven forbid Aaron Glenn leave? Because I think Aaron Glenn, I just would love to run this back one more time and just see where this thing could go next year. I hope Aaron Glenn comes back.
You know what? I haven't even looked to see if there's a guy that I would want to put on the roster as a defensive coordinator coach if Aaron Glenn leaves, because I don't think Aaron Glenn is going anywhere. You remember 2 years ago, what was his thing that he kept saying?
He wants to be the best coordinator.
He kept beating that to the
Lions.
media. He kept beating to the media. I want to be the best defensive coordinator the Detroit Lions have ever seen. I want to be the best defensive coordinator. Even last year, he doubled down on that sentiment. As of right now, Ryan, in 2 years, he's not the best defensive coordinator the Lions have ever seen. He was 3-13-1 his first year, and the Lions were horrible. Now, we know he needed more talent, and they got some talent, and they were better the second half of this year. But that defense was abysmal for the first half of this season. So if I'm if I'm Aaron Glenn, and I'm a man that values what I say, I'm not going anywhere. I'm doing this right now because I'm getting used to the interview process. I probably already told Dan Campbell, hey, look, dog, I'm just trying to get used to the interview process. I want to see how it goes. I'm not leaving. We can talk about that later. We can drop that bomb on the media whenever you want to. But I'm just wanting to see how the process goes, because this will be Aaron Glenn at some point making a decision on coaching an NFL franchise. So I think he's getting the experience now. But based on what you said 2 years ago and then again last year, and now where that defense seems like they could be this year, job's not done yet.
I got your guy. Your defensive coordinator will be Kelvin Shepard.
He's a guy that I think.
Book it.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I think is definitely on the rise. What he did with that linebacking core last year, with many people believe had no talent whatsoever, one of, if not the weakest position groups on the team, he got those boys flying around. Yep. He revitalized Alex Anzalone's career.
You got it.
Took this 6th-round pick in Malcolm Rodriguez and turned him into a really, really damn good rookie linebacker that a lot of people are excited about around here. I do think he is on track to be a defensive coordinator in this league. I'll say this, though, about Aaron Glenn, too. If the Lions project to what we think they can project to next year, I mean, Maz, Bray, we put them at 12 wins minimum next year. That would absolutely get you an NFC North Division championship and a home playoff game. And hell, if you can get a 13th win, you might be fighting for a top seed. So you can call me crazy all you want, but if Aaron Glenn, as a defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, who wins a division championship, who wins a playoff game, then you go. I mean, you go Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn going to be taken off that staff.
Oh, yeah.
I agree. And if I'm Aaron Glenn, I keep saying Aaron Rodgers, man. I want to talk about him
He's
today.
coming up.
And maybe that's exactly what it is. But talk about Aaron Glenn. If I'm Aaron Glenn, I take a page out of Ben Johnson's book. Ben Johnson, look, I think he interviewed once. Then he said, you know what? I'm good. I'm coming back next year. I got one interview under my belt. I see how the process works. I know what I want to do. Also, when you leave from winning, checks are bigger, Ryan Ermanni.
Yep.
When you win and then go somewhere, also when you win, you have your pick of places to go. When you don't win and they're kind of guessing like, well, we're projecting that you could be this coach. You got to pick what they give you. If they win next year, whether that's 11-6, whether it's 12-5, whether it's a playoff game, etc. Now you're Aaron Glenn, now you're Ben Johnson, now you're picking jobs. Now Ben Johnson can look at the Chargers job next year and say, hey, look, sorry, Brandon Staley, I'm taking that job. Now Aaron Glenn can look at a job that he likes. So when you win, there's more money involved in your contract, and you get the pick of the litter. So I think both those guys, one is already coming back. I think Aaron Glenn comes back.
Another name out there, Steve Wilkes.
Yeah.
He wants to be a head coach. Probably not going to happen right now. But you know what? Defensive coordinator, why the heck not? That'd be a great.
He would fit in perfectly with the staff, too.
Now, one of the guys that was here a couple of years ago and a friend of the show was our former offensive coordinator.
Hey, Lynn.
Anthony Lynn getting interviewed now for Washington's offensive coordinator's job.
You know what I would do if I
imagine? And Braylon, we both shake our head on that because We don't think he's great offensively, but here he is. He's getting another opportunity.
It's because he's a great man.
Yep,
He's a great man.
It's a relationship-oriented business, man.
Relationship-oriented business. Like Anthony Lynn, and I'm glad you brought that up. I watched Anthony Lynn because I used to crack. Like we used to get after it a little bit in Cleveland because he was just Anthony Lynn was a cornball. And so like we would crack jokes and he would get stiff and serious. So like for a while I stayed back from A. Lynn. I think like we joked too much. And I just would watch him move like with the owners. I would watch him move with the general managers. I would watch him move with the PR. I would watch him move with community relations.
I find him a prideful man.
Like he's a prideful man. He's very polite to everybody. He's nice with everybody. Asks about everybody's kids. That goes a long way when people are thinking about hiring people. They're like, yo, A. Lynn's on the market. Oh man, great guy. They may not even talk about ability. Like, notice the first thing I said, oh, man, great guy. Family guy, he's a great dude. You can count on him. None of these three things I said have anything to do with football. Guys like that get hired all the time because they're great people.
You brought
up your Jeff Saturday thing.
I understand that.
Relationship.
That's exactly right.
Taylor Heineke won't go anywhere with Anthony Lynn, by the way.
Well, whether it's Anthony Lynn and Jeff Saturday, it's a relationship-oriented life. I mean, adulthood is all about relationships, right? I mean,
so is this business we're in.
The whole thing is relationship. The only reason I'm here, to be honest with you, is because of the decade and a half relationship that I've had with Chad Johnson, the owner of Lady Jane's and WoodwardSports.com.
And I'm here because you and D-Mac and me and been together for all those years.
I mean, it's a relationship thing, right? I mean, when they said, okay, great, I need Tom Masway to be the producer. That's what it was.
And then you brought my name up.
That's right. So
here we are, relations.
That's how it happens. I do want to say this. You brought up a name, Steve Wilkes. I believe that Deuce Staley had the assistant head coach tag as well on there. That leaves a void at assistant head coach. If you're Dan Campbell, if you're Brad Holmes, I hope you're having a conversation right now to say, you know what? It's a really great man. This is a really great coach. This is a really great spot. Maybe you hire Steve Wilkes as a assistant head coach position. Let him rove around. Let him sit up in the booth. Let him help you with clock management during the game. Wouldn't that be something?
I'd love it. Hey, remember when the Panthers...
Unless he gets a head coaching job somewhere else or if he wants to take a defensive coordinator job. Yeah. But this... I think it's cool to be part of the Detroit Lions now. Everybody wants to be part of the Detroit Lions with what they have.
When the Panthers beat the Lions, second to last game, the two men met at midfield. Mm-hmm. Dan Campbell's like, you had your guys ready, and you guys kicked our ass.
I remember that. We played that audio.
Yeah, you guys kicked our ass. You guys were ready. You already got a relationship there.
Mm-hmm. The only thing with that is, notice most associate head coaching positions, most of those guys, they're positional coaches.
Sure.
They're positional coaches because you don't want to elevate your D coordinator, offensive coordinator, because they got too much on their agenda.
That was Dan Campbell in New Orleans.
Exactly, but once again, he wasn't an offensive coordinator. He was a tight ends coach. They do it because you're a tight ends coach or you're a position coach. You got less on your plate, so they can bump you up and you can still let the coordinators do what they do. So Steve Wilkes coming here to take an associate head coaching drill, that's a step back, I think. You're talking about a guy that almost was a head coach for the Carolina Panthers. He was interviewing for that job. He was in the running for that job. So to come from that, you're talking about if Aaron Glenn leaves?
No, I'm
just
talking about
general?
in addition because Braylon, any position,
but that's a step down.
Any position he takes is a step down now. Once you're a head coach, any position you take is a step down. Unless you sit out, but some guys, they don't want to sit out.
Yeah.
They love football. So you kind of sit back and really choose your situation. You choose your situation. I think it's a great situation to be a member of the Detroit Lions staff. And I think there's a lot of respect there. I think Dan Campbell is commanded and deserves and has earned a lot of respect. And does he know everything? No. And that's where I like Dan Campbell too. And I don't think he gets enough credit for this. Dan Campbell is so comfortable with himself.
Being yourself.
He's comfortable with his limitations. He's comfortable in elevating guys. He's comfortable with bringing guys like Dre Bly and Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson and Kelvin Shepard, firing friends. I mean, he is very comfortable with his ability to be the head coach of the Detroit Lions. I think he would welcome a guy like Steve Wilks to come in and take a look at everything and just really be an analyst.
I mean, Steve Wilks would definitely be a benefit to the team, and he would benefit. Dan Campbell would benefit by it. I just don't know if that's what he wants to do. But if he's one of these football minds that I can't sit at home, I can't wait at home, I need to have a job if nothing happens, then it'll be a great situation for him. I'm sure they will find a spot and make him feel good, and they will work that spot well. Dan Campbell, you're right. He is damn comfortable in his own skin. And the thing that he does best, Ryan, so many coaches, so many guys want to be the smartest man in the room. We know a couple of those guys. They're in state. They want to be the smartest guy in the room. They want to have all the knowledge in the room. They want to make all the decisions. They want to do all this. He is smart enough to know, I don't know what I don't know.
That's right.
But you know what I can do? I can bring somebody's ass in here to know that for me. And it's that job. It's their job to know that. I don't have to know everything, but I can surround myself with people that do. Those are called billionaires.
That's right.
Hey, sidebar, Brian Flores. He's just a figurehead with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
But that's a great point, Tom, because that is exactly the role that I think you can hire Steve Wilks
There's
for.
a head coach that did that.
A Brian Flores type role with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You could have a Steve Wilks type role here with the Detroit Lions. And look, again, any role that Brian Flores takes after being a head coach, it's a step back.
Right.
But that's a situation that you feel like, you know what, I can contribute here. There's a role for me to play here. There's a good situation for me to get back out there.
But at the same time, isn't it a role of burial, though? Like, if you look at Brian Flores, he's buried with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Brian Flores isn't getting another job.
Well, they'd let him go if he had an opportunity.
He's not getting another job.
No.
The only job he has in the NFL, his coach is what color? Steve Wilks is allegedly thinking about suing the NFL. Steve Wilks, if he comes here as an associate, he's getting buried as well. That's why if I'm Steve Wilks, I'm very leery about making that decision, because you're going to get buried. Brian Flores, I forgot he was even in the NFL. 2 years ago, he was the hottest thing. Well, last year, before the situation that he sued, he was the hottest thing going. He wanted for the Giants.
Let me ask you, though, Bray, is it, if you look at a guy like Wilks, is it more beneficial for you to be in the league or more beneficial for you to be out of the league? And that's a consideration too. It's you know,
I'd rather be in.
I would too. I mean, now Doug Peterson, he got another job as a head coach, but I can't. I mean,
there's a lot of guys that have set out, but not necessarily his color.
But I mean, the guys that have sat out that got a job, two guys. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. Sean Payton won a Super Bowl. I really can't think of anybody else. Mike McCarthy won a Super Bowl. You know, I can't. I mean, Jim Caldwell, did he sit out a year before coming to the Lions?
No, the Dolphins hired him.
That's right.
No, the Dolphins hired him after the Lions. I'm not sure what he did in between the Colts and Lions.
Yeah, I think he came straight here.
Did he come straight?
I think he came straight here.
It was after Schwartz.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Jim Schwartz got
Schwartz.
coordinator jobs after sitting out. You know, he sat out here. He got a job in Philadelphia. He sat out in Philadelphia and just got hired somewhere. Cleveland for defensive coordinator. So
the issue
he'll be a head coach again.
You bring up a good point. It's a lot of guys that didn't get enough jobs and they're looking for coordinator roles. A lot of those guys that you name, they're defensive-minded coaches, and that's what Steve Wilks is. And this happens to be an offensive-led NFL now. So if you're sitting out as a defensive coach, you at Ryan and Mass, you're absolutely correct. Sitting out as a defensive coordinator or sitting out as a defensive-minded coach isn't a smart thing in this offensive-led NFL today.